This is DW News, live from Berlin. Germany's parliament rejects sending long-range missiles to Ukraine, at least for now. Lawmakers in parliament today voted against sending Taurus cruise missiles, at the same time voting to send more military aid to help Kyiv push back Russian invaders. Also coming up tonight, an Israeli strike hits a mosque in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. The Hamas-run health ministry says nearly 100 Palestinians were killed in the past 24 hours. And the Brazilian football star Dani Alves, convicted of rape and sentenced to prison by a Spanish court. The former Barcelona player says he plans to appeal. I'm Brent Goff. To our viewers watching on PBS in the United States and to those of you all around the world, welcome. We start with breaking news from Spain, where a massive fire has engulfed an apartment building in the city of Valencia. It's unclear how many residents are still trapped inside, but firefighters have already rescued multiple people. The fast-moving blaze spread to a nearby building as well. That's what we've been told, and authorities have set up a field hospital close by for potential casualties. We'll bring you more on this story as it develops. Again, fire in an apartment building in Valencia, Spain. All right, now to our other top story. Germany's parliament has rejected a motion to deliver Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine. At the same time, it backed a move to provide more military support for Kyiv. Now, opposition lawmakers in parliament, they've been calling for the German government to deliver the long-range Taurus missiles, but the government has blocked deliveries of the powerful weapons on the grounds that they could be used to strike targets deep inside Russia. The rejection comes today, the 10th anniversary of Moscow's illegal annexation of Crimea. When Germany has pumped up its aid for Ukraine, the government says that it is almost doubling military support this year compared to last year. And it is also spending big on defense here at home, promising to increase domestic production capacity.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his defence minister putting their elbows into it. Here, breaking the ground on a new ammunition plant earlier this month. The Rheinmetall factory will eventually churn out 200,000 artillery shells per year, underlining efforts to ramp up production.
We need this urgently, because as hard as this reality is, we are not living in peaceful times.
Germany has been on a journey. Before Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion, Berlin's focus was on peace, offering Kiev little more than headgear.
We will send 5,000 helmets as a clear message that we stand by their side.
Since then, they've sent battle tanks, howitzers, Irish-T defence systems and more. And now the debate is whether it will also send some of its powerful Taurus cruise missiles. Russia's attack on Ukraine was a watershed moment, and it's forced Germans to confront some hard truths.
This means the same for the Bundeswehr as it does for German society. We must become fit for war.
The government has coughed up an extra 100 billion euros to bring the Bundeswehr back to life. Orders are in for new US-built fighter jets, 60 combat helicopters, and a full air defence system fit to guard the skies of Europe. Defence spending is growing again. At the height of the Cold War, West Germans spent up to 5% of GDP on security. That decreased gradually until reunification in the early 90s, when it fell off a cliff. Now it's at that 2% NATO target. And this week, the Defence Minister signalled there was room to grow.
With the development of our industry, what I mentioned too, that all has to fit together, and then we might reach 3% or maybe even 3.5%. It depends what's happening in the world.
And as Germany builds its production capacity and bolsters its military, the question now is whether taxpayers are willing to foot the bill.
So the German parliament has both rejected a motion to deliver the Taurus cruise missiles to Ukraine, also approving a measure to provide Ukraine with more military support. Does this mean no Taurus missiles ever? We put that question to German lawmaker Alexander Müller, a defense spokesman for the Free Democratic Party.
I think there is a chance, of course. We needed 1 year to deliver the first tanks to Ukraine, and we as a parliament, we wanted it, and we have decided this, and later on also the Security Council has voted in favor of this, and we have delivered tanks. We have delivered so many things. I'm sure that also our cruise missiles one day will be delivered.
That was the German lawmaker there, Alexander Müller, speaking with us earlier. To the conflict now in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli military has again bombed the southern city of Rafah overnight. Local authorities say that strikes destroyed a mosque and numerous homes and caused a number of deaths. Violence has flared up in the occupied West Bank as well, with gunmen opening fire at a checkpoint near Jerusalem.
The shooting started during the morning rush hour. The three gunmen targeted slow-moving traffic near a checkpoint on the main road east of Jerusalem. One Israeli settler was killed in the attack. Several others were injured, according to emergency responders. Israeli authorities said the shooting was fortunately cut short quickly, with security forces and armed civilians at the scene killing 2 of the attackers. The third was then detained while trying to flee. Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir joined police at the site, where he called for more limits on Palestinians' movement in the occupied West Bank.
I expect that there will be more and more checkpoints here, that there will be restrictions. We need to restrict and finally come to an understanding. Our enemies are not looking for excuses. Our enemies just want to harm us.
Violence has soared to record highs in the West Bank since Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th and the start of Israel's campaign in the Gaza Strip. On Thursday, Palestinians in Rafah were awakened by yet another round of Israeli strikes on the city, where hundreds of thousands have fled the fighting. This time it was a mosque that was hit and flattened, with only its minaret left standing. Locals said nearby homes were also heavily damaged in the attack.
The mosque was struck by 2 rockets. See all those houses that were destroyed here? They were housing for displaced people and people coming from elsewhere. The whole block and the one behind us was totally destroyed, as you can see.
Several people were killed in the bombing, among dozens killed overnight in Israeli strikes, according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. It's just the latest instance where a mosque has been targeted during Israel's campaign, with dozens destroyed or damaged over the last 5 months of war.
Yeah, this is DW News. Coming up later in the program, the Middle East conflict takes center stage at the Berlin Film Festival. We'll get a sneak peek at a documentary directed by an Israeli journalist and a Palestinian activist. That's coming up in just a few moments. Here's a look now at some of the other stories that are making headlines around the world. Alexei Navalny's mother has accused Russian investigators of trying to stage a secret funeral for her son. She says that she has seen her son's body and that she's resisting pressure to not hold a public funeral. Navalny's family have alleged that the Kremlin murdered him, an allegation that Moscow has rejected. A 17-year-old suspected of stabbing 4 classmates at a school in western Germany. At least 2 of them seriously injured. That's according to police. The suspected attacker is also believed to be a student at the school and is now in police custody. In China, a container ship has collided with a bridge in Guangzhou. You see it right there. A large section of the bridge collapsed, plunging several vehicles into the water. At least 2 people died. 3 others are reported missing. The issue of migration is taking center stage in the United States in the run-up to November's presidential elections. The number of migrants arriving in the U.S. reached a record high at the end of last year. Now, while political battle lines on border policies between Republicans and Democrats are well established in Washington, volunteers on the ground at the southern border trying to help migrants, they say they're losing hope that there is a political will to solve the problem. DW correspondent Benjamin Alvarez-Gruber reports tonight from the U.S.-Mexico border.
The California border town of Yacumba Hot Springs has become a flashpoint for migration. Thousands of people have crossed into the United States here in recent months, many of them from Latin America.
We're trying it here now because most of Nicaraguans who crossed through Piedras Negras, they say they will send them back. Yes, that is why we're trying our luck here. We are here now. Suffering, but we are here. Border Patrol has passed and took children and mothers with them. They said they would pick us up in the morning.
These volunteers are helping them. Warm clothing after a rainy night and food. Many had no tents to sleep in. The next step is to wait for Border Patrol to pick them up for registration.
People get stuck here. Sometimes these days, usually only for a matter of hours. But there was times at least 6 weeks ago where people were here for 4 or 5 days in the same location.
Sam and his son John are locals. Along with other volunteers, they have been taking care of newly arrived migrants for months.
It leaves me very disappointed. It's quite frankly kind of absurd that my family and just a group of regular volunteers are filling in this role. It should be done by the U.S. government. There should be the Red Cross out here. There should be many different organizations, but they're just not here.
Daily, the volunteers scan the area along the border for people. The so-called San Judas break, a gap in the border fence used to pave the way for many migrants.
So this is a transit camp that was set up by the Mexican National Guard that was designed to halt any migrants that come through this gap over here. Prior to this establishment, we would see smugglers bringing people through non-stop throughout the day in cars, driving up and down this dirt road over there. They would pack sometimes up to 12 people in a single small SUV.
Volunteers say the strategy of deterring migrants does not work, because they will just search for other gaps as the legal ways of entry are limited. Sam and John don't get financial support from the authorities. They are disappointed not just with Washington.
It's almost like they have given up on the visual PR aspects of it. They just don't care anymore. I mean, look at it. This has been going on for 6 months now. Steady, constant, and nobody, lots of talk. Blah, 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 lots of talk, lots of media attention to the talk. But you seen anything change? I haven't.
Good news for this group of newly arrived migrants. After hours in the cold, Border Patrol came to pick them up. They will be registered and a decision will be made on whether they can stay in the US or they will be sent back to their countries.
Well, the largest hospital in the U.S. state of Alabama has suspended its in vitro fertilization treatments. It follows a ruling by that state's highest court that says frozen embryos or fertilized eggs are the legal equivalent of children. Now, the hospital says that it has to evaluate whether or not its patients or doctors could possibly face criminal charges for being involved in IVF treatments. The ruling by the all-Republican Supreme Court in Alabama has put into question the future of IVF. IVF is considered one of the best treatments for patients who would like to have children but have been unable to conceive naturally. Well, I'm joined now by Jill Weber-Lenz, a law professor at the University of Arkansas. Professor, it's good to have you with us. Let me ask you, what does this ruling in Alabama, what does it mean for people in the states who are already in the process of using IVF, hoping that they can conceive?
Well, thank you for having me. That depends on the clinic. And as you just reported, a few clinics are pausing, hopefully temporarily, to try to figure out what the ruling really means. As of right now, what the ruling means is that clinics do need to be more careful and make sure that they take care of any frozen embryos, because if any embryos were destroyed because of negligence, that means the people whose embryos those were could sue the clinic for wrongful death now that the Alabama Supreme Court has said the embryo is a child.
And this ruling just doesn't come out of the ether, does it? I'm wondering, what is the connection to the abortion debate in the United States? And would we be talking about this if the U.S. Supreme Court had not overturned Roe v. Wade?
I think we still would be talking about this if the Supreme Court hadn't overruled Roe v. Wade. I mean, this was a very natural decision for the Alabama Supreme Court because they had already held that a pregnancy, so if an embryo in a womb, was a child for purposes of this wrongful death statute. So it was a very natural next step for the Alabama Supreme Court to say, well, also it covers embryos that happen to be in a freezer. I mean, what this can mean, though, for why it worries people about abortion rights in this country is because every time we have a court that says, a baby during pregnancy or a baby is a baby in the freezer if it's frozen embryo, I mean, the more context in which that happens, the more it seems like, well, maybe it's also a person in abortion. And if that were true, if the U.S. Supreme Court decided that with respect to the word a person in our 14th Amendment, then that would mean abortion has to be illegal everywhere in the U.S.
I understand that with this ruling that possibly a physician, for example, doing IVF could be charged with killing or hurting, damaging a child. And could you help us understand how the thinking there, because with IVF treatments, the goal is to help conceive, the goal is to help create a new life. How would the law be able then to argue that a life was being killed or being damaged or hurt?
Yeah, and it's important to note that this opinion has no criminal consequences as of right now, right? So if a clinic were to accidentally destroy an embryo, as of right now, it does not have to be worried about being arrested for murder. But what this opinion says is that if the clinic is negligent in how it stores and takes care of the frozen embryos, that's when the clinic needs to be especially worried. So in this exact case, at least what's alleged is there must not have been a lock on the door for the freezer because a random patient was able to walk in and grab some of the embryos and dropped them. This has bigger ramifications too, though, because in the U.S., we do have a lot of embryos in freezers because we take a lot of eggs out at a time. Anytime you have eggs in a freezer, you better make sure to be careful with them because otherwise, under this opinion, if you negligently destroy those embryos, you can get sued for the death of children.
Could this then be a wake-up call, not only for Alabama, but for maybe the entire IVF industry around the world that maybe there is a tendency or it's possible for healthcare professionals to become nonchalant about the fact that frozen embryos are just that, frozen embryos.
Yes, and we don't have a lot of regulation of fertility clinics here in the U.S. So there's no state or federal laws mandating any precautions to make sure these embryos are okay. So yes, maybe this possibility of this lawsuit for the wrongful death of children would make clinics think more about security. But it's also making clinics think more about whether they really want to be doing IVF in such a way that they're storing a bunch of embryos because they're possibly opening themselves up to litigation. And again, though, this is people suing for the damage, for the death or destruction of the embryos. So it's not criminal consequences yet, but these are all things that these clinics are thinking about.
Right. Doctors will definitely have to worry about, and I'm sure that's not going to make malpractice insurance go down either. Law professor Jill Weber-Lynn from the University of Arkansas. We appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
A court in Spain has found Brazilian soccer star and former Barcelona player Dani Alves guilty of raping a woman in a nightclub. He's been sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Now, the case is one of the most high-profile trials in Spain since it changed the way sexual assault cases are prosecuted.
The ruling comes less than a month after a trial that gripped the world of sports. Former Brazilian soccer star Dani Alves will be going to prison for sexual assault. He denies any wrongdoing, and his lawyers say they'll fight the verdict.
I believe in the innocence of Mr. Alves. Mr. Alves is fine. I will now explain the sentence to him. I have not been able yet to study it, but I can already tell you that we are going to appeal.
Alves is widely considered one of the greatest defenders of all time. He has won over 40 trophies during his career. Half of those he has from his 8 years at Barcelona. At the time of his arrest, he was under contract to play for a Mexican club. His case has been one of the most high-profile trials in Spain since a law was passed in 2022 that made consent a key element in sexual assault cases. The victim, a 23-year-old woman, says Alves raped her in the bathroom of a Barcelona nightclub. The court found the rape allegations to be true, arguing evidence shows the victim did not consent. Alves has also been ordered to pay 150,000 euros in compensation.
We're satisfied. The sentence recognises what the victim said all along. We're satisfied and happy for her and for all the women who have suffered abuse.
Alves' sentence is just over the minimum of 4 years. He has completed a quarter of his sentence since he was arrested and could soon be released.
Here's more world news this hour. Albania's parliament has ratified a deal with Italy that calls for it to build processing centers for migrants. Now, it would allow the Balkan country to hold thousands of asylum seekers picked up in international waters by Italy while their claims are being processed. Human rights groups have expressed concern about this deal. The European Union says it may be a model for other countries. U.S. lawmakers visiting Taiwan have accused China of bullying the self-ruled island. A bipartisan congressional delegation is holding 3 days of meetings with Taiwan's top leaders. The visit, which is focused on regional security and trade, comes at a time when divisions in the U.S. Congress have fanned questions about Washington's commitment to its allies. A bushfire in southern Australia has forced more than 2,000 people to leave their homes. Authorities ordered the evacuations from towns in the west of Victoria State as a precaution. Officials say firefighters on the ground are being supported by aircraft to battle the blaze, which is roughly 50 square kilometers in size. Here's a reminder now of our top stories. A massive fire has engulfed 2 apartment buildings in the Spanish city of Valencia. Local officials are reporting at least 7 injuries. The cause of the blaze is unknown. And the German government today voted to send more military aid to Ukraine. It also voted not to send Taurus long-range missiles to Ukraine. You're watching DW News live from Berlin. After a short break, I'll be back to take you through the day. Stick around. We will be right back.